And we are going to head into our very final lightning talk of the day. And it's worked out quite nicely because even though he submitted as a pseudonym to begin with, we were delighted to learn that our final speaker of the day will be our very own Noah Swartz, the kind of original organizer of Roguelike Celebration, who stepped back from organizing but has now returned to the stage as a speaker. We're going to be using a recorded talk, but then he's going to be around for live Q&A. So, cue up the talk.
Hello, I'm Noah Swartz, and this is my talk for the 2021 Roguelike Celebration. It's about the book The Tombs of Atuan and how I feel that it embodies a lot of the aspects of the roguelike genre. This is my first talk at the Roguelike Celebration, so I'm really happy to be here. So thanks for having me. Before we get into it, I want to call out that there will definitely be spoilers in this talk. Both spoilers about the book and about the Earthsea saga, as well as for NetHack. I'm going to be talking about their similarities, so I'm going to be talking about a lot of endgame content in NetHack, as well as passages from the book and its plot. So if you want to read the book unspoiled, or you want to play NetHack unspoiled, you may want to not watch this talk or close your ears for parts of it. I highly recommend both, and hopefully you've gotten the chance to do so before watching this talk. For those of you who aren't aware, The Tombs of Atuan is the second book in the Earthsea trilogy. There are now 6 Earthsea books, so not quite a trilogy anymore, but it was written in 1969 and released in 1970. It's really good. If you haven't read it, you should go read it. I read the first one, I think, in 5th grade, looking for a high fantasy adventure thing, and I got something very different. Ursula Le Guin writes really good characters. It's really about the personal struggles of the people. I didn't pick up another book, the second one, until much later in life. In fact, shortly after I had finished NetHack, and I really felt that there were a lot of similarities between the two. And I thought to myself, this is like the most roguelike book I've ever read. I wonder if there's something there. The game I'm going to be talking about is NetHack. It's the game that I have the most familiarity with. I think a lot of these things are shared between it and Rogue, but I'm specifically going to talk about NetHack story elements because I've played it the most and I've actually ascended in it, whereas I've never successfully completed a game of Rogue. So one of the first things that comes up in the book is there's this character, Arha, or Tanar, who gets conscripted into a priesthood for an unnamed elder god. She becomes a priestess there at this temple and spends her days inside the temple taking care of it, protecting its treasure, and living there. Now, those of you who have played through a game of NetHack and gotten into the end game will remember that at the end there is a high priestess of Moloch who, much like Arha, protects the temple, spends her days living there, waiting for adventurers to come through so that she can protect the Amulet of Yendor. Here are some pictures from the back of the book. You can see that this diagram of the hall and the tombstones actually bears a lot of resemblance to this final scene in the game of NetHack. You have a graveyard and a temple and a wall in between, and much like that, you have that here in the book. So there's only one priestess canonically in the book. Every time one dies, a new one is found, and much like that, there is a single unique high priestess of Moloch in the game of NetHack. On the right here, you see these diagrams of the labyrinth. This is the undertomb, or the area underneath the temple of the unnamed gods. And for those of you who have played a lot of Roguelike, you may remember a lot of areas like this, these twisting mazes of confusing turns meant to slow you down and befuddle you. Well, that is exactly the point of these labyrinths under the temple, and it is what our lone hero encounters as he goes on his quest for the amulet. In the book, the hero is a wizard named Gad, who you have seen in the previous Earthsea books and is sort of the protagonist throughout all of them. He is on a quest for an amulet, which I'll get to in a second. So we have this maze in the Undertomb, which you see in this diagram. It really reminded me of these mazes in NetHack. And yes, what is Gad looking for? He's looking for a mystical amulet much like in NetHack, he doesn't quite know what it is. He knows that it's powerful and that it has a lot of significance. It's very important for him to get it from this tomb and bring it back out. And just like in NetHack, you have the Amulet of Yendor. You don't quite know why it's so important, but it has really important powers, and it's going to change the world, or at least appease your god. So you must go on this quest for it. Well, Ged is in the same situation, and he has dedicated his life. He's willing to risk it to go retrieve this amulet of power, though he doesn't quite know what effect it will have. On his quest, he provokes the priestess, and she traps him in the dungeon. He gets lost in these labyrinths, and what happens? A truly roguelike thing. The hunger clock, takes its toll on him. So we've all probably had a situation in NetHack where you're stuck in a room, you can't find the exits, you're searching all the walls. Well, Ged has the same thing. The door is locked, he can't get out, and he goes from being sated to hungry to fainting. A common form of death in the roguelike genre. And it's right here in this book, the origin of the hunger clock. Luckily, Arha takes mercy on him, nurses him back to health, and they continue their quest for the amulet. Much like in a game of NetHack, they find a downstairs and go to a whole new area of the dungeon that they've never encountered before. Seeing new things, they believe the amulet is further down in the darker reaches of it. But just like in NetHack, there are dangerous traps along the way. Luckily, Arha is a skilled and experienced player, and she knows that proper strategy is to search every tile before you step on it, just in case there's a trap. And she manages to find one of these traps before falling into a pit to her presumed death. They manage to escape it and make their way to the area, the treasure room, where the amulet is stored. But getting the amulet is only part of the game. For those of you who have finished NetHack, you have to escape with the amulet too. Well, much like in NetHack, as you are escaping, there are still obstacles that they have to overcome. They get very confused, they lose their way. I know as you escape in NetHack, parts of the dungeon that you've been to before disappear, you forget what they look like, you get teleported back and forth to sort of confuse you on your way out. Well, the same thing happens in this book. The Nameless Ones sort of exert their presence on both Ged and Arha. They become very confused, they struggle on their way out. They're not sure which directions to go, and they really have to focus to find their way out of the dungeon, much slower than they would have before. And just like you might get chased by the wizard, Rodney, on your way out of a NetHack dungeon, they too feel that these nameless gods are chasing them on their way out. They're aware of their presence, they're aware of how far they are, and they threaten death if they are to lag behind. Finally, they do manage to leave the dungeon with the amulet. And while I'm not exactly sure this is what happens in the code in NetHack, but I'm going to presume that it is, once they leave the dungeon, it disappears. You can't go back to it. And so the same thing happens in this book. As soon as they escape, the dungeon crumbles into the ground, it's swallowed whole, and disappears. Much like in NetHack, I assume that's what's canonically happening, but yeah. It's a single game, single run, that seed is gone now that they've escaped with the amulet, and you can't go back to the same dungeon. So, to recap, I think that there are a lot of similarities. They both take place in these twisty, dark dungeons full of traps and danger, with long mazes that they have to adventure through. There's a single adventurer, in this case it's a wizard by the name of Ged, who is on his quest for the amulet. There's a hunger clock, and of course, permadeath. You can't just wander around forever. There really are consequences to that. There's stairs to multiple levels, traps that they have to watch out for and search for, and of course, they're both looking for this amulet at the end of their quest that they have to take from the dungeon and escape with. Now, that escape is very difficult. They're being chased by these nameless ones. They're being confused. But there is this real feeling of real consequences. It's a long, arduous, emotional journey. Ged goes through lots of states of hope, feeling very confident, to disheartenment, feeling very scared, much like I have, and maybe you all have in our long games of NetHack. You know, you're 30 hours in, you have this elation, and then this despair, and then elation as you escape various traps. There's the same emotional roller coaster in the game. But the real question is, did this actually have an influence on the roguelike genre? Did any of the developers read this book or were aware of it? I know many people cite Dungeons and Dragons or Tolkien as influences on roguelikes, but I was curious to know if this book also did. So I took the liberty of emailing the developers, and I got this great email back from Michael Toy, who, among other influences, did say that he had read this book multiple times, and probably subconsciously it did affect his vision of what should go into Rogue. At least, you know, the quest for the amulet, but also sort of this emotional roller coaster or real life consequences. And I think that there are definitely a few more similarities. So that's my talk. Thank you all so much for listening to it. And I want to take a moment here at the end of this wonderful conference to thank all of the organizers and all of the speakers and all of the people who have put time into making this happen. It's really great to see it happen for another year, and I hope that you all had a wonderful time. And let's all give them a big round of applause for all of the work that they put into it. So thank you so much, and if there's time, maybe I can take questions.
All right, well, thank you. I mean, don't give us your claps. Give Noah your claps. Claps enough for everybody. Yeah. And hello, we have you live.
Hello. Good to be back.
It's good to have you back.
Nice to see everyone. Yeah, although I've been on stage a lot at the Roguelike Celebration, this is in fact my first talk. So it's very cool to be able to finally give a talk here.
Yeah, and what a talk. I like that it ends with the, anyway, this isn't just hypothetical here, I talked to the developers.
Well, you know, I spent a lot of time emailing roguelike developers in my capacity as organizer of Roguelike Celebrations, so I'm very
you got quite the Rolodex.
Mm-hmm. I'm standing by with my copy of Tombs of Atuan, the dog-eared version that I took a lot of notes in for this talk, but I don't know if anyone ended up asking any questions.
It looks like we don't have any firm questions so far, though I'm curious. I think one that might be interesting is just if you have any other recommendations of Ursula Le Guin books that might be good for people to check out.
That are roguelike related or just generally good?
I mean, maybe just generally, I guess both.
Every one that I have read is quite good. Lathe of Heaven is also very short and really well written. The entire Earthsea series is great. I highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't read it.
Cool. We have one question from DVD. Will you be at the Internet Archive on Thursday?
No, unfortunately, I'm out of town. But I look forward to seeing, well, I hope next year's Roguelike Celebration we can all meet in person again, and I look forward to seeing a lot of you there. Since there aren't other questions, I'll take this opportunity again to express my thanks to all of the organizers for carrying on the conference and making it run really well for a sixth year. All the talks that I caught were really great. I hope all of you had a really fun time. And it's great to see the event thriving.
Thanks, Noah. I mean, yeah, I know, speaking for myself, and I'm sure the other current organizers, really thankful for you, and the work that you did putting this together. It was very important to me as a attendee and speaker, and now it's great to get a chance to make sure it keeps running.
Yeah, and I can't see chat, but I hope all of you are expressing your thanks to the organizers. Send them nice notes, shout them out on Twitter. As a former organizer, I know how much it matters when people say nice things, so I'm sure they'll appreciate it.
People are doing a lot of dancing in chat, which is also appreciated because, we wrote the dance corpus, so it's nice to see people enjoy it. All right. Well, then, thank you, Noah. And I hope you enjoyed your first time speaking at Roguelike Celebration.
It was great. I hope you all enjoyed the talk.
Thank you.